Welcome, everyone. This is the first Focus Friday of 2026, and we're glad that you're here with us. And if you're up in the Northeast or Midwest even, hopefully you're keeping warm. All right. On the screen, you should see the housekeeping. Basically, the session is being recorded so that you're aware of that. If you have a question, please ask it. Generally, use the Q&A, or you can put it in the chat. Q&A is kind of a little better because I think we get a little pop-up when you do the question if we're not looking directly at the screen. Presentations will be emailed to you sometime early next week. So you will get a copy of those along with a link to the recording. All right. Renee, anything to say before I jump in?
No, just glad to be back. Thank you.
There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, so I'm going to kick off and talk about variables. So I'm going to show you how, it's a variable basic. It's going to show you the different types of variables and how they can be used and where you can use them. So there are two types of variables that you can use in the WebFOCUS product. You have a local variable. The local variable is only accessible from within your procedure, the current procedure. So if I say execute my procedure and I have single ampere variables, I can only use those ampere variables in that one procedure. Once the procedure finishes, I can't use it anymore. We also have global variables, which start with 2 ampersands. Global variables, if you're using Focus, where you're doing your own coding, it's more manual. Then if you create one procedure that's some global variables, then the values of the global variables will be accessible in other procedures that you run in your same session. So it goes across procedures. Going back to local variables, they're named. So you have an ampersand, and then your variable name. You also have positional variables. So amper1, amper2, amper3, and we'll show where those come into play. But when you call a procedure and you pass values and you don't specify a name that you want to use in the procedure, then it gets passed as a positional parameter. And that's where the amper1, amper2 comes in. For you guys on WebFOCUS, global variables, they're there, but they're not there. So in WebFOCUS, we have what we call non-persistent connections. So when your procedure runs, it's over. So any global variables that you set aren't still going to be available. The exception to that, though, is if you set a global variable in your edit-sprof. Edit-sprof is run every time you run a procedure just before the procedure runs. So if you do a global variable in edit-sprof, then you can then query those values in your local procedure. All right, classes of variables. We have system variables, obviously supplied by the system. Statistical. So statistical are things like I do a modify. How many records did I read? How many did I insert? How many did I update? Those kind of things are what we consider the statistical, not to be confused with mean, median, mode, standard deviation type of thing. And then we have special variables for interactive use using, including amper echo. So we have a special set. If I do dash set, amper echo equals on, semicolon, then I will get echoed back to the screen each dialog manager command or each focus command that we run into. All right, looks like there's a question. Is there somewhere I can go to learn Focus code? So we do have an education site. I'll have to find that link, but I'll see if I can find it and I'll put it in the chat later, or I'll ask Shay to include it on the follow-up that you'll get early next week. All right, variable characteristics. All variables are stored as are strings of characters. So when you say dash set and variable equals a value, then that value is stored as alpha. Even if you're storing numbers, if you're saying the variable equals 1, 2, 3, 4, it's still stored physically as alpha characters. It's how you use it that determines whether it's used as numeric or not. If you use an AMP variable in an expression and it has a numeric value, it will be treated as an integer. Now we do have a setting, set DM precision, which you can turn on, which is defaulted to off, but you can set it to say, if I want my dialog manager variables to go to 2 decimal places, you can then set DM precision equals 2. Maximum number of variables is 1024. This probably needs to get updated. I don't believe there is a maximum anymore. It should only be limited based on your system and also with the maximum length of the variable. Variable name, 100 characters. Again, that might have gone up also. I'll have to double check on that. But as the product grows, we try to eliminate as many of the old restrictions that we used to have. The variable name should start with capital A to Z, lowercase a to Z. Numbers, don't make it a single number, because if you do, then we lose that positional functionality that we had where we had AMPER1, AMPER2. Especially if you name something AMPER1 and then you pass the parameter in, you might get something that you didn't expect. Hence, the name must start with an alpha. There we go. All right, data types. You can test for what an AMPER variable is, what type it is, by putting .type at the end of the variable. So if it's numeric, which means it only contains numbers, then it's n. Again, it's an integer, unless you have DM precision set. Any calculations are done as double precision and then stored. If DM precision is off, it's stored as an integer, but if DM precision is on, it's stored with that many decimal points. If it's an alpha, it's a type A. And strangely, I found this one where undefined is type U. And I started thinking, well, when would that ever happen? It's either a number or it's a character. So don't ask me what is an undefined, because I really don't know. I've never seen that. But it's in the product. All right, Fex Launch in Reportcaster, I don't think execute at a prof. Anything that's run on the server should be running at a SPROF before it runs the procedure. Because a lot of times in SPROF, you have all your data connections. So if you're accessing, say, SQL Server or MySQL, and you don't have that data connection, you're not going to be able to reach out and get the data. So look at that again, because I'm pretty sure it is running at a SPROF. Somebody raised their hands. So if you have a question, if you can put it in the chat or in the QA. Otherwise, I'll assume you just raised your hand on accident. Which type has AMPER variable equal? Okay, Gregor, good question. Which type has AMPER variable equal to if I have 2 single apostrophes or single quote marks? Is it alpha or undefined? we'll try that. I believe I tried that and it was alpha because I think it actually defaults to a space. We'll give that a try. Good question. So here we have dash set amper test equals, and then we're setting it to the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We end with a semicolon. And then we're doing a type amper vertical bar test, which looks kind of strange. But what that is doing is it allows me to actually type the amper variable or the amper sign and then the word test right next to it. So the vertical bar in this case is used as an escape character. So I'm putting the ampersand, but I don't want to evaluate amper test. So the vertical bar just says, I'm just using it as a separator, so I'll get amper test when I do my type at the end. So type amper vertical bar test is amper test, and the type is amper test.type. In this case, I get n because it's all numbers. If I do A, B, C, D, E, this time I get an A. Now, for you guys in WebFOCUS, when you run a query and you don't have a value for an amper variable, what happens? You get prompted. In Focus, that also happens. But I can test for the existence whether an amper variable has a value or not using the .exist at the end of the amper variable. Now, if your WebFOCUS environment is set to turn parameter prompting off, then you won't get prompted for the value. And then you can check if you don't have, you'll see where it's actually set to 0 that I don't have a value for this amper variable. So you get a 0 if the variable does not exist, it doesn't have a value. You'll get a non-zero if it has a value. So in this case, I have dash set amper sales equals semicolon, table file car, print car sales by country where country equals USA. So for those of you that have used the product for a while, there is no country USA, at least in the car file. We go to a hold file, and then we're going to read the output of the hold file. The dash read file will populate based on the values in the hold file. To use dash read file, you have to have a master, which is why we're doing it on table hold. After the read file, we're saying if amper sales.exist equals 0, which means there is no value, it hasn't been set, then go to not there. Otherwise, show the value and it does exist. So when I run this, I get 0 output records. So my read file has no records in it. So I'm going to then jump in the if statement to the not there, and then we'll print the no sales value. We can also check the length of a parameter. So you can get the length by adding the .length at the end of the parameter name. Return 0 if the variable is not present. Returns length if the variable is present. So in this example, we changed the where country equals USA to where country equals England. So there should be 4 England records. We're going to do a read file of hold it, and we're going to check the car field. Well, if the car field has a length equal to 0, we're going to say it doesn't exist. Otherwise, we're going to show the value and the length. So we do the read file, we get the first car, we put out 4 rows, and the first car is going to be Jaguar, and the length of Jaguar is 16. Or is it? The Jaguar, the word Jaguar itself has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we're saying the length is 16. Why is that? Because the field R is an A16, so it has 16 characters. That's where that's coming from. If you don't want to get the trailing spaces, we have a function that you can use to do that. So here I have dash amper region equals west, and if I look at the length, it's going to be 4. If I have west space, 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 In this case, the length is 10. You can use the truncate function, which will remove trailing spaces to then get the length to 4 again. All right, sometimes when you're writing code, you're going to put amper variables in headings. You might put them in literals, in single quote marks or apostrophes. And a lot of times, you might not get what you thought you're going to get because you're not getting the value of the amper variable. You're getting the amper variable, the ampersand, and the amper variable name. If that's the case, but you truly wanted to get the value of the amper variable, add a .eval at the end of the variable name, and it will evaluate and resolve to give you the value rather than the parameter name itself. So you might need these. You might need these when the variable may not be resolved in a complex expression, something in quotes. All right. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is automatic single quote handling. So if you have something where you have embedded quotes, so maybe it's IT apostrophe S, and you want to use that in a where field equals or contains this amper variable that has the apostrophe in it, we have to double up the apostrophe and put it in single tick marks and single apostrophes in order to then have it translate into a single apostrophe. So the rule is 2 ticks inside of a pair of ticks is equivalent to 1 tick. So hopefully we have an example that shows that, and of course we don't. So we'll do an example of that. All right, some system variables that are available for testing. So these are all the system type variables. Some common ones are amper focexec, contains the name of the procedure you're running. Amper TOD, time of day. If you want to check and see if you have any CPU lagging time, you can check the Focus CPU before you run a table request and compare it to the value after. Date FMT, we have an amper date for pretty much any date format that you can think of, and that includes any of the translation. We talked about echo before. Folk user shows the username of the current session's effective user. Here are the statistical variables. Again, we have accepts, deleted, format, number of lines, number of records. All right. So we did some basic information about the amper variables. Now we'll go into how do you give them values. So we have the dash set, which you've seen in some of the examples. We have to end the dash set with a semicolon. It can be set to a literal, another variable, or an expression. If I have the values in a file, I can dash read the file. I do not need to send them. I don't need a master file. So you just have to have a file def or an allocate to the DD name or the file name. And you say dash read and then the DD name and then the first amper value dot and then you give it the length. Notice it has A5 and I3. Those will work. And we're saying that the first field is going to have 5 alpha characters, and the next field is going to have 3 integer characters. The A and the I basically don't matter because we're just going to read 5 characters and 3 characters. Because again, once it's stored in the variable, it's stored as alpha. We can also read a common limited file. And as I said, the DD name must be file depth or allocated. All space must be accounted for. So if I have spaces between my values, I need to then put in something just to account that I want to skip over a certain number of spaces. And then we have to dash close the file when we're done. We also have, instead of set, we have dash default and default H. Default and default H say use this value if you haven't been provided for it. And the difference between the H and the one without the H is H for hide. So if you're doing parameter prompting, you're not going to get prompted for any default H that you might want to change the value for. So dash default, you, depending on your settings, could get prompted to give a new value if you don't want to use the default. And you'll see the default value. But default H, you're just going to use that value and you're not going to be able to change it through parameter prompting. Default cannot be set to an expression, which is kind of, it's a little nuisance because a lot of times you might have somebody put a date in and you want to set the default to be the beginning of the month as opposed to a date in the middle of the month. Unfortunately, right now, it has to just be a value. And instead of dash read, we have the dash read file. The difference being you need to have a synonym or master in order to read a file using dash read file. You can pretty much read any file that has a master, including the car file. The problem with the car file, though, is it has several paths. So you're only going to be able to read down the leftmost path. If you have multiple rows and you want to read values from each of the rows, you can do a repeat loop. And if you want to store those in like an array, then you can use index variables. Okay, if I'm in one procedure and I want to call another procedure, so I'm in procedure A, and procedure A is setting up different variables. Then I want to then pass these variables to procedure 2. I can then say execute procedure 2 and then pass the values. So in the first example, ABC equals value 1. There's a parameter in that procedure called ABC, amper ABC. There's also a value in there called amper DEF. Notice the ampers are not really needed when you're passing it this way, but it doesn't hurt if you have them. Value 2, on the other hand, doesn't have parameter equals in front of it, so it's going to pass into the procedure as positional. So it's the second position, so it's going to have a value of amper 2. All right, let's see. Is the statement dash set ampervar equals, if ampervar exists equals 0, then test, else ampervar, is that legal? I would say that it is legal, yes. So you're checking to see, do I have a value for this particular variable? And if I don't, then I want to set it to a default value. So that's another way of doing your own default via a set. And it might be able to give you a workaround for it, not being able to use an expression in dash default. Very good. Okay, I think I covered all this. Implicit prompting, if I encounter a variable, whether it's focus or WebFOCUS, and it doesn't have a value, you will be prompted, unless you have certain settings not to do that. In the focus world, we have prompts, as opposed to just AutoPrompt. You can force a prompt to get the value of an amper variable. We also have a Windows facility that lets you create on-screen kind of menu-ish type of functionality, and then we have CRT form, which lets you then put on the page and set input field, and then get the values through the input through the screen session. If you're using Focus Studio, you probably have some CRT forms because CRT form functionality is fully available in the Focus Studio product. All right, that covers that. I did say we will try something live. All right, so we have, first thing we're going to try is dash set amper var 1 equals tick tick. And then we want to know, is it alpha or undefined? Amper var 1 dot type. So it's set as a number. So a blank or a zero are all translated into a number. So in this case, the lack of a value would be the same as just having a space. Which brings up another interesting point. So we have 0 and blank are considered equivalent. So if I say if amper var equals 0, go to skip, and then I'll have a skip here, and then I'll say type var not 0, and then I'm going to stop, and then skip, I'm going to say var is 0. One, one, one. Helps to be consistent. So it says var is 0. Well, it's not. It's a space. So to account for this, we have a function called as is. So I'm going to say if as is var 1 is equal to 0. Now it says it's not 0 because it's going to check specifically for the 0 blank condition whether it exactly matches what you have on the other side. And now if I make this 0, it is 0 again. So some functions we learned so far with with the variables are truncate and now as is. And the as is if you have 0, am I looking specifically for a 0 as it's a 0, or am I looking for 0 as that's not a space? All right, that one, and then the other one was this one. And I'm not sure if this is going to work because I will probably have parameter prompting. Amper var equals amper var this. All right, Marissa, we'll see you next month. You'll still be able to see the video, so that's good. So we had to drop off equals 0, then test else amper var. All right, so let's first give it a value. And I'm also going to do set amper echo all. So then I can see all the output. All right, so in this case, it came through. It had a value of 1, so we just used the value that we passed in. And if I make this so it looks like we was done like that. Let's do tick, tick. No, because it still thinks it has the value. All right. Stick around at the beginning of my next session, because I'm gonna let Renee start. I'll do it on focus because then I hopefully won't get parameter. I won't have to worry about worrying if I'm going to get prompted or not, which I probably will. But we'll give it a try. Any other questions on what we've gone over so far? Yeah, so Eric, you would think that depending on where you use TickTick, it will either be treated as a space. So in Dialog Manager, it's treated as a space. But if you use it in like a filter, where a field equals TickTick, and it's going to a relational database, then it will be considered null at that point. So depending on where you use it, affects what the meaning is going to be. So the best thing to do is just try it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and let Renee kick off her session. I keep wanting to do that.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. And let me share my screen. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's session. It was actually a great lead-in with Walter talking about variables, because now I'm going to talk about the WebFOCUS Designer side and how to create dynamic filters based off of your data with Designer, about both that as a standalone visualization, an authored page off of new content, or an assembled visualization page, which is off of existing content. So I'm going to work with WF Retail Lite as well as the car file briefly for today. So just in terms of where the tutorials are, you can see I have a retail demo here. Is my WF Retail Lite. It's a flat file. There's the plus data when you're over here in applications directories that I'm hovering over on the very left-hand side there. And you can see if you click plus data where I'm over, and I go down to the bottom of that drop-down, tutorials. For the car file, if you don't have it set up, you can work with who's responsible for your environment, create legacy sample tables and data. That's how it'll be created in IBI SAMP. And then for the retail demo, you can select that. And right now, I deliberately have a very vanilla environment, so I don't have any of the data adapters configured. So you'll get DATREC flat files, basically, as the default. But if you do have other adapters configured, you can have that option to create there as well and adjust options accordingly. So I just wanted to level set where the tutorials are for today's session. So now I'm going to come back over here on the left-hand side to my workspaces, and I'm going to work in my workspace, my content. And so today's session is really all about dynamic filters. So I'm going to do the very first thing I'm going to come in is plus create a visualization. So this is a standalone visualization. It could be chart type. It can be a report. I'm going to go into the retail demo, which is my WF Retail Lite, and I'm going to create visualization. So I come into the default designer visualization, and at this point, again, it can be a chart or a report, but how do we deal with filtering, right? And so just to clarify, you will see when you're creating a query, right, there's a filter bucket here. This is for static filters. Static filters get applied to the query, to the procedure, to the visualization every time it's run, and that's certainly valid. And so any fields you put there will be applied at all times. And the little filter drop icon here, you can see on the visualization toolbar here in Designer. Everything else here is related to dynamic filters that I'm covering and hovering over. But this very last one, edit filter expression, is specifically designed for static filters. I clicked it. It opens up a dialog over here. It even tells you static filters. You really need filter expression when you want to have an or condition between static filters, right? So I just want to differentiate. That's static filters. That's a separate conversation. But just to be aware of it when you come into Designer, what that is separate from dynamic filters, right? Okay, so I'm going to cancel that out. So let's just create a very basic chart here. And from prior demonstrations, you'll know I tend to pick product category and revenue. Here we have a very basic chart, certainly could be a report as well. And we can come down here on, the template picker, content selection, and select standard report or grid as appropriate. But we'll stick with chart for the moment. And again, everything related here is to dynamic filters, right? Dynamic filters are AMPA variables behind the scenes, right? And the filters get placed here where it says drop a filter or field here. Those are where you place the filters. So how do you get filters, dynamic filters, within a visualization? Again, we're talking a standalone visualization at this point, and we will talk about pages. as we go along. So let me just show you that if I, in the field listing, in the resource panel, if I right click on my product category, there's an option to add to filter toolbar. If I do that, it adds product category to filter toolbar, or whatever appropriate field it might have been that I had selected to add it. And then if I wanted to, if I hover over, you'll see you get that little X, I can delete it. Or instead of, right clicking and select, I could just drag it into the filter toolbar. Same thing. Also, if I right click, there's a bunch of properties on the filters here on a single visualization. I also have an option to delete there instead of hovering over. Now, the other way I can add filters to the toolbar is I can actually drag it from the query itself, from one of the buckets. So here's product category in the horizontal bucket. If I drag it over, also, or I can actually right click it and also add it to filter toolbar. Same thing. And if I click it right, I get the list options and everything. So, and again, right click, you get options and features, which I'll go over in a minute. So those are the ways that you can add filters to the toolbar. And just to go to outline to show you, right click on content to view the source code, you can see that we created a dash default for it. _folk _null means all values. And then you can see the where clause that we built, and Designer, the later releases, will prefix the variables, like instead of just getting amper product _category, you'll see amper df, the Designer framework _wh _n, and that can actually be changed. I'll give you an insight into that in a moment. So here we are, just to show you what's created behind the scenes, right? And that's certainly valid, and that's probably most likely how you will create your filters for your visualizations. But I want to mention another option. So I'm going to remove the product category filter that's there right now. So at this point, standalone visualization, you can create filters, right, by either right-clicking a field and add it to the filter toolbar, either in the field list or in the query in one of the buckets, or you can actually just drag and drop from either location, from either the resource panel field list or from one of the query buckets. But there is another feature to be aware of, and it's use content as filters, right? So this is checked automatically, and this is saying, you know what, you can select and create filters by selecting off of the content that's currently displayed in the visualization. So right now we're in design mode, right? We're in preview. We're developing our visualization. So I can actually go here within the canvas, and I can lasso, let's say media player and stereo systems, and I could say, you know what, keep those values. Notice it creates the filter up here with those values selected, and if I click it, you can see that they're selected here. It's allowing for multi-select, and I can do select all or clear if I want. And then I even have an option where here I could do the exclude. Remember, it said keep or exclude. I can actually say, you know what, I meant to do exclude. Instead of deleting it and redoing it, let me say exclude here. Now I'll see I get that little equal sign with a slash, meaning not equal. So it's going to give me everything but these two values that I selected. And I can also delete that filter. Just give me a second there. And now it goes back, right? There's no filter applied. Again, we're still in development, design, preview mode. And then I can reselect, and I could say exclude here if I want. So now I'll get all those other values. You can see that happen. But again, I can right click, and I can uncheck exclude. And so now it'll only include those two values. Now,
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
There's a question. Will the capability to define complex dynamic filter logic come into a future release? They like to use or, like he can do in it for a static filter.
Right. That's not there yet. It's something that we're looking at and working on. Right. So there's a lot of great things, right? Also simple filters, right? That's another feature that we're also working on and everything. So I'm trying to showcase what we have available now, and I'll try to tell you when certain things, everything that I'm going to show today is available. Like if you're in Designer like 9.2, 9.3, everything I'm showing you is there. I'll mention the few features that I will show that are in certain release levels, just to be aware of it. But we are working on to give you even more control and capabilities than you already have. But hopefully I'll be able to showcase what you need to know, at least for the time being. Okay. All right, so here, again, use content as filters. I have those selected. This is, now if I run this, I just want to run it. And you're going to see that it applies that selection to the visualization. Notice it's not prompting me for anything yet. And you might have run into this and say, wait a minute, I have a filter there. Why isn't it prompting me? I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I just wanted to be aware of when you select use content as filters and you have that checked, which it is by default, it impacts your design time, right? Preview mode when you're developing, but at runtime, you're not going to see the impact other than that selection is applied to the visualization. And then I also want to go a step further, and let me just show you that for a report, right? You can see the same thing there. Let me take the filter off. And let me just select a few, and I'll say keep that. And you can see 3 of 7. And certainly that's valid. And if I ran, it'll run with that selection applied. I'm going to come back. I'm going to change back to chart. I'm going to remove this filter and just set it back to what it would have looked like if I would have came in to designer to start with. And so, okay, I still have use content as filters. Now, again, when I run it though, right, even if I make the selection and everything, if I can lasso here right now in designer with that check, but at runtime, again, standalone visualization, you can't lasso. You can certainly hover and you'll see the tooltips, but I can't lasso. I do want to be clear, though, that this feature, if I uncheck it, right, I can no longer lasso in design preview mode in development while I'm developing the visualization as well as runtime. Just to be aware of, though, if you deal with active, right, active reports, right, so I do AHTML, so Analytics Anywhere, in Document Analytics you might hear, or active reports, regardless of the name that you're aware of, that feature isn't related to that per se, right? Because I can run that on its own and I can actually select values in active and it has its own, and you could see that, right? So I just want to mention that doesn't impact active in Document Analytics feature output format. Okay, so now I have it unchecked, use content as filters. I can no longer select here. So how is this feature really, right? So you're saying, well, it's great. Okay, I can select. And actually, let me show you one other thing I didn't show. Let me add product subcategory. So now I have 2 dimensions here. Now, if I were to select content, and let me just recheck it, right? So now it is use content as filters. Let me just select some values here. I say keep. Notice it says 6 selections. You don't get a drop down with the values, but if I hover over, I can see what's selected there. And also at runtime, it does apply. So just let it run just so that you can see it at runtime. It actually applies that selection. So just be aware of that behavior when you're using content as filters. So where does this feature really gain its power, right? It really gains its power when you convert this to a page. So let me take out product subcategory for the moment, right? And let me just convert this to a page. At this point now, right, I have use content as filters. I'm going to uncheck it. And both for this page, now we're in an authored page, right? Because we created this page from new content. So, and I have it unchecked. If I go at runtime for it, I can't select content either. I'll just let that come up, right? I could certainly hover over and get my tooltips as well. So now let me change it back to use content as filters. Now, if I'm here in the page, I could certainly say keep, right? It applies. I'm going to remove that. But now I'm going to run this page. And I had removed the filter, but now I have that container with my request, with product category and revenue, and I can actually select and it'll create that filter for me. And then you'll see media player and stereo systems as the output. And certainly now I have the drop down and I can adjust accordingly, or maybe I want to add those as well. Now see 4 of 7 and it'll impact the visualization. So you can see the real power is when you have an authored page with that particular feature. And then where it really becomes powerful is, let me just create, I'm going to add another container here. And let me put product subcategory, and I'll do quantity sold in this one. Now I'm here, right? Again, I still have use content as filters. I'm going to select and keep those. You can see how it impacts the visualizations. And then I'm going to actually delete that filter, and then I'll run the page as is without any filter applied, but I still have that now use content as filter option. And now I can select it here too. And you can see now the impact as well. And then of course, I have this, and I can adjust accordingly and add a few other values and have the impact as well. So where are we at this point? At this point, we know how to add filters to the filter toolbar. And we know use content as filters. While it impacts a standalone visualization in development mode and design preview mode, at runtime, you really don't have that capability. Again, separate from active. But when you convert it to an authored page, that's where the real power of that feature comes in. It's something, again, with filtering, with dynamic filters, to be very aware of, right? So now, and that's only just a small part, right? That's one feature out of it. So I'm going to close out this one. And I'm going to come in, and now I'm going to create another visualization, and I'm still going to pick WF Retail Lite.
Renee?
Yes.
So there's a question, is there documentation on how to write WebFOCUS code with interactive filters with OR, find, and chaining?
I believe there is some stuff within the documentation itself, but the whole point is, right, is to allow Designer to develop this for you, right, and develop the chain for you. So let me actually show you creating it in Designer and then looking at the source code created behind the scenes. But there is documentation within the manual on how we kind of develop that.
Yeah, I believe it's in developing applications.
Yeah, I think the key thing is the whole point of the tool is to help you develop it without having to go necessarily to the language to create at that level. But certainly you could use it as a skeleton to enhance it.
And anything you do outside of the Designer, though, you probably
exactly, yes,
you
can, exactly. It cannot be, the moment you start, so you can use Designer to help develop what you need as a start, and then if you really need to go beyond what Designer can currently provide you, that's when you can go into the source code and you can start editing and changing things. But yes, once you start doing that, then you're no longer going to be able to develop further within the tool. So that's the caveat, right? Because we have to be able to recognize the code that's within the source code in order to be able to generate that within the tool and ultimately your visualization page, etc. So, all right, I know we're running a little shorter on time than I expected, but so let me develop a visualization. So I'm going to leave it as a chart, and I'm going to add in revenue, let's say MSRP and gross profit. And this is the kind of cool stuff, I think, with dynamic filters. So now I'm going to say product category, and it's going to be a busy chart deliberately, product subcategory, and model. Anybody that knows WF Retail Lite knows that product category, product subcategory, and model are actually chained together. That's something that you can, if I were to go to here and open it up and edit as text, I can search, for folder equal product, and you can kind of see it here. Here's the hierarchy that's been created for this particular hierarchy. Product category, product subcategory, and model is that particular hierarchy. But there's obviously others within WF Retail Lite. So coming back here, let's go back to Designer. So now let me actually create some filters. I'm going to just drag in product category, product subcategory, and model. And let me go to the outline, right-click content, use source code, and you can see that we created default values with the underscore folk underscore null for the default all values. And then you can see the 3 where clauses that we created, which can kind of help you understand if you wanted to create your own. And you can see the or there for like multi-select and finding it within WF Retail, that value and source, and then the format, and that we're doing an equal, whether it's ascending or descending, etc. You can scroll over just for reference so that you can see it, and then you can see the titles there as well for display for the filter. So at this point, right now we have filters. And by the way, because I didn't go through the features that are all there available to you, if I right click, right, I can actually say, you know, right now if I click product category, I'll see search, select, all clear, and it's multi-select at this point. But I can actually right click and change that on this visualization, and I can say single. And if I do that, then you'll see that you don't have the select all and clear buttons, and I can only select one of those values. But I'm going to come back, and again, I'm right clicking on the filter. I'm going to put back to multiple. So we did look at exclude when we were looking at use content, and I certainly could do that here as well. But assort ascending and descending, now this is a capability that you could do sorting within assemble visualizations page, but for a single visualization or an authored page, we didn't have this capability until 9.3.4. So that feature is a 9.3.4 and higher. You'll be able to actually, so I could check here, sort descending, and if I click it, I can see it's descending, but I'm going to come back and put it back to sort ascending. In fact, I can actually reorder these posts just by moving them, these filter boxes, if I wanted to, and that would impact the order of the wheres, and that was also a 9.3.4 feature. So if you were prior to 9.3.4, you'd have to remove the filters and reorder them the way you want to. Again, assemble page, you had that capability, but for visualization or an authored page, you didn't have the capability to reorder these until 9.3.4, along with the sorting. Also, what other features are here? Rename parameter or rename the title for the display in the filter. You can do either of these. This capability is part of 9.3.5. So 9.3.5 and higher, you'll have these features that are available. And then required selection is going to enforce the selection that you have on that filter. Just to be clear, when you're in a standalone visualization or an authored page, there's features available for the filters, but they're not as robust as they are for an assembled visualization filter. Just something to be aware of. Okay, so now that I have these filters, and I'm still, again, just in development mode, I want to look at these options right here. Link all filters, link hierarchies, do not link filters. Now, product category, product subcategory, and model, we already know is a hierarchy that exists in WF Retail Lite. But when you're in a standalone visualization or an authored page, we give you extra capabilities. And we allow for your alphanumeric filters, your list boxes, to actually have multi-directional filtering. So when you have multiple prompted filters for alphanumeric dimension fields, right, they're chained in all directions by default. So this is why you're seeing here link all filters. So that means a selection from one prompt control can impact the others so that you have the values, so it only displays the relevant values to you. So it kind of ensures that you can't select filter values that result in no data, but you have the option to change this. So right now, by default, it's multi-directional, or I could say link it as a hierarchy, or I could say don't link it at all. So let's look at the default right now. And again, we're still in development mode. We're still in preview. We haven't run it yet separate. So let's look at it and select computers. If I select computers, I'll see it limited product subcategory to smartphone and tablet, and it also limited the models. Now I'm going to come back here and clear computers from product category, and let me just show you the listing so you can see. I can see all the product categories now, all the product subcategories, and all the models, which like start with 2100, 4200 there. So now let's come into the middle of the hierarchy, and let's pick out smartphone. Now when I pick out smartphone, remember this is just a hierarchy, right, in the relational, and it's not relational in this, but in WF Retail Lite. But if I come back here, notice that it limited the scope of product category to computers and model to the models, right? And that's because we have link all filters. It's multi-directional in this case. So just to be aware of the impact. And again, that's the whole point of that, is to provide that option, especially like you're in development, but it has an impact when you have an authored page. And that's why it's important to understand this. So these designer features are there to kind of give you more flexibility, but also to ensure that you will get output for your visualization. Now, again, remember, this is listed for a list box for alphanumeric. So not that your other filters like dates and numeric like sliders can't impact, but they're not going to be chained in this way. The multi-directional kind of capabilities that you're seeing here are really specific to this feature, right? Okay, so we have smartphone. Let me clear smartphone out.
Right.
And yes, go ahead.
So the question is, by link all filters, does that linking work backwards from model to subcat to cat?
You're getting to that question right now, right? I'm going to answer that. So here, now if I select model and I pick 2100 and I still have link all filters, again, we're in the visual. We haven't run this yet, right? You can see the impact. It says streaming. So yes, it links back for those alphanumeric field. It will link backwards, right? It's multi-directional. It's not in one direction as you would with a hierarchy, right? Unidirectional. It's actually multi-directional. So here now I'm going to change this. I'm going to clear this out. Great questions though, because it's leading right into, so it tells me it's making sense, right? So link hierarchies is what you would expect it to be. It's going to link as if it's a hierarchy, right? So it's going to link the hierarchy that's there. And actually, if I pick computers, it will give me what I expect here, right? Smartphone and tablet, because of the hierarchy, and then it limits the models as well. But let's clear out that, put it back to all product categories, and now let's go to product subcategory. And let's select smartphone. And now you can see, I see all the product categories, but model has been limited, right? So what I would expect from a hierarchy. Let me clear smartphone and then go to model and now pick 2100 here. So what would I expect? Because it's a hierarchy, I'm still going to see all the product categories and see all the product subcategories there. Okay, so far so good. That makes sense. Now let's look at the last one that's option, do not link the filters. So even though there's a natural hierarchy between product category, product subcategory, and model that exists in the data source, right? I've selected do not link filters. If I pick computers, I'm going to see all the product subcategories and all the models. And then I'll clear that out. And let's go to and select smartphone. Try to select the same value so you can see it for comparison purposes. I can see all the product category, but I still see all the models too because we're not linking them. And then let's go to model and pick 2100. And now you can see I have all the product categories and all the product subcategories, right? Because they're not linked together. Okay, great. I have this, I've set it up. That's what I want. What happens when I run it? Well, when I run it, I don't get prompted for anything. It's not asking me for input. Now, I know I created these. I know these are dynamic filters. And if I look at the view source, I can see, right, that I have the where clauses there, the amp variables and everything. And certainly, if I were to select something here, like, well, let's just select it from here. Let's select computers and accessories, right? It impacts. But now when I run here, it'll actually have computers and accessories. So it's applying the selection, the filters, to my visualization, but it's not prompting me for it. So how can I enforce that with a standalone visualization? So I'm going to just come back here. I'm going to say clear. I'm going to leave do not link filters. And just for edification, just to save, let me save this visualization at this moment. Retail dynam filters, right? And save that. So right now I'm saving this visualization that I have that has product category, product subcategory, and model. And I have selected here, do not link filters. Haven't selected it's all the values, right? But I certainly could change it and everything like that and come in here. So if I run this, it's not going to prompt me, but it'll apply whatever selection I've selected here. But let's do something, let's require, right? That was one option. I said you could say require selection. Now, if I right-click product category, I can see that requires selection, but these two are not required. But let me just run that. Now you're going to see something happen. You've seen preview here, right? Because this is actually AutoPrompt, and we haven't really saved, although I've saved the procedure, we're still in Designer, so you'll just see preview. That's by default. You see the red box here and make a selection because it's a required selection. So let me pick computers. Now when I do that, it actually selected smartphone and tablet and narrowed the scope down for product subcategory, and it did the same for model. And right now you should be asking yourself, wait a minute, let me pick smartphone, and it narrowed down model even further. I run it, I'll get my output, but you're going to say to yourself, wait a minute, Renee just spent all this time talking about how we have do not link filters and we require a selection, we get AutoPrompt, we run it, but it's a hierarchy. It's not respecting what's in and that's actually expected. So I want to be very clear, when you're running with Designer for those features, AutoPrompt on a standalone visualization is going to respect the chaining, or if there's no chaining between the fields, it won't be chained. It does not leverage these features that you see here within Designer, the multi-directional potential feature, if you wanted to have that enabled. For an authored page, it will, and that's where it's important to understand pages and going one step further. So I just wanted to be clear. I'm going to actually right-click, not required something, but I had already saved it without it, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to close this out. I'll close the preview out here from AutoPrompt. If I run the procedure right now the way it is, right, it's not going to prompt me because I don't have required selection. It would just apply the filters, whatever selected values I had, which I have just all. So now let me right-click, Properties, go to Advanced, and Prompt for Parameters, and save that. Now when I run that, what happens? You'll see the title because, right, that's my feature, but this is still AutoPrompt. Now I don't have required, but it's still going to prompt me, and it's still going to impact the product subcategory and model, right, because it's still going to respect chaining because it's AutoPrompt. Right, and I'll just say all, right, all selected there, and I could submit it and run it. So again, standalone visualization, if you do required selection, right, or prompt for parameters, that's AutoPrompt. AutoPrompt respects the hierarchy. It's not leveraging those multi-directional features from the visualization if you have it enabled, right? It's not going to look at that. It looks at the fields, what's involved in the AutoPrompt, and respect any hierarchy that's part of that data source, right? So I went through all of this. Why would I explain all that? I'm going to uncheck this, save it. So right now, there's no prompt for parameters, right? Run it. New window, we're not going to get prompted, right? So there's no required selection. There's no prompt for parameters. I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to edit that. And now I'm going to actually hover over here so that you can see I'm going to convert to a page. Convert to a page. I have a page here now, and you can see, right, I have do not link filters is still selected here. Now, if I'm here, and let me just pick the middle option because it's the easiest. I'm going to pick product subcategory, smartphone. Do not link filters. I see all the product categories. I see all the models, right? And I'm going to leave that there for runtime purposes. Let me run the page, and you're going to see, right, smartphone, right, that value right from the default, whether it's a standalone visualization or an authored page, the value you select in your filter is applied to the visualization at runtime. You can see I have smartphone here, but notice it has all the product categories and all the models available to me, right? So it's actually respecting that, the features here. Now I can actually change this, right? And let me just clear this off. So now it's all again. I'm going to come back here and say link hierarchy. Now when I do it, you'll see all the product categories, but the models have been limited, right? So it's respecting it as a hierarchy. Clear that out. But if I do that at runtime, what happens? Same thing. It will be respected because this is now an authored page. I'll let that run so the container can populate, and then I can actually select smartphone. And you'll see I have all the product categories, but the models have been restricted. So it's respecting the hierarchy. And then I'm going to come back for the one last time and go to do, well, actually link all. So I want to link all filters, right? So if I do it from here while I'm in development, and this is again an authored page, I come through, I select smartphone. Notice that product category and model have both been impacted because we're now multi-directional, right? And I'm going to clear this off and go at runtime. And let that run. And now, if I select it here, you'll see the same impact, right? You'll see computers and you see the restricted models. So what do we have so far? You know how to enter how to add filters to the standalone visualization or right to a page. Either way, an author page, if you have a standalone visualization and you do required or prompt for parameters, that will prompt you for the variables and you can change and adjust them, but it's going to respect the hierarchy. It doesn't leverage the multi-directional features that you have here. However, if you convert it to a page, as you see here, it will impact not just within design preview mode, but at runtime as well. Truly crucial factor. And then I just want to close this out. And Walter, how much time do you need at the end? Is 10 minutes enough or what you need? Or are we running low?
I'll make it work.
Okay. So let me go and create an assembled visualization, right? So this is a page we're creating from existing content. You have a lot more.
Renee,
Yes, go ahead.
Before you get in on that, there's a couple of questions.
Okay.
Is there an equivalent of prompt for parameters in WebFOCUS code, or should I use dash default and for variable?
There is no
variable equals folk
Yeah,
mode.
because if you put dash prompt in code for WebFOCUS, right, it's just, it parses it and it's going to prompt you for variables up front regardless. So you can't use prompt to control and say, I want you to prompt down further below at this level of code. It's still going to do that all up front in advance.
I remember in the old App Studio days, we would create your own launch page and then have the parameters all outside of the report that you can then populate. Is there something equivalent? I mean, we've been showing that here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're showing it right now. And not only that, you can really control, you saw I can control the defaults there, but I can actually even have more control in an assembled visualization if I get to this point where you can actually control those default values. It behaves a little bit differently. So is there any other questions, Walter?
Yeah, if I didn't have my two fields defined as a hierarchy in the master, could I drag the two fields into the filter box in Designer and then tell Designer that they are chained?
And you can, because, right, if you put it on an authored page, right, those filters then respect the designer features. You're not depending on AutoPrompt, because AutoPrompt would see it if they're not, it's not a hierarchy, it would see it as not as a hierarchy, and it would not chain them regardless. But if you took your visualization, converted it to an authored page, it would actually chain it and respect it. And you're going to see even in an assembled visualization how it can create a hierarchy even from data that's there, or if the hierarchy is there, we can actually remove the hierarchy. So you have that level of control.
And one more question. Can we make a dashboard with multiple visualizations and make a public link for the dashboard?
Sure, that's as long as you make that dashboard public and it can be available to everyone, that's certainly a capability. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're in assembled visualization, and I'm going to take the retail dynamic filter request visualization that we just created and add it to the page. We see it there. Notice that on the very left-hand side on my sidebar here, filters has a little purple icon saying this. So I'm going to click that. Add all filters to the page is one way, or I could do them individually, right-click. Notice, though, how there's a hierarchy here. If I close the little arrow here, you can see that product subcategory and model. It recognizes that there's a hierarchy for those fields and respects it. So in an assembled visualization, the features that you just saw with a standalone visualization or an authored page with those multi-directional filtering is not part of an assembled visualization page. It's hierarchy or it's not chained, either or. It's unidirectional, right? So right now we have it respecting the hierarchy. So if I did here, product subcategory, and I pick smartphone, you'll see here, I have all the product categories, but the models have been limited. And if I run this, it respects the hierarchy. Notice that it didn't bring the default value here, unlike when I had a standalone visualization or an authored page, because when you have an assembled visualization, the filter has more capabilities and you can actually highlight on the filter and scroll down, and you have control here in the data settings to create the default. You can default filter a static value. You can put a global variable there. And in the later 9.3 releases, you even have the edit option, right? So you can actually put and control it from there. Otherwise, you just have to type the value in older versions, right? But at runtime, the default value you have here in preview for an assembled visualization is not at runtime, unlike a standalone visualization or an authored report, right? But definitely at runtime, this same thing, it will recognize the hierarchy. So if I pick smartphone here, you'll see, I see that, but the models are limited. Great. Now what I wanted to show you is what is a great capability here. Let me come back. I'm going to put this back to all. So here in the filter section, when I'm here in the resource pane for filters, if I right-click on product category, there's an unchain all the child filters, so I can actually unchain everything and not have them linked, even though they are a hierarchy in the data source. Or at the child level of the hierarchy, an individual, I could say unchain from the parent. So let me actually do that for model. I'm unchaining at the model level, right? And once I do that, now I've said product category and product subcategory are chained, but model is no longer chained. Now let me look at here. If I change this to smartphone, excuse me, smartphone, if I select smartphone for product subcategory, I'll see all the product categories, but notice I see all the models because now model is no longer chained. And that is true at runtime as well. So if I run it, you could just see right here's all the values just to showcase it. Now pick, and in fact, let me pick product category and go to and select computers, right? Just so that you can see the impact. You'll see that smartphone and tablet now have been selected from product subcategory, right, as values to be available for the filters, right? But model will have all of them because it's no longer chained. And I could have went a step further. We ran a little bit short on time. But, you know, if you know the car file, try this afterwards, maybe as a little test for yourself to see if you kind of figure things out from this session. If I were to create a car visualization, right, let me just close and leave this, and create a car visualization. It'll just take 2 minutes. And I'm going to go to IVI SAM, car, create visualization. Let me make this a report. And let me add country, car, model, body type as rows, and then retail cost, dealer cost, and sales as your summaries. And then let me actually create filters for country, car, model, and body type. I'm actually going over there and adding them to the filter. And I'm just going to save this as a car report with filters. So right now you should know link all filters, right? There is no hierarchy in the car file. I mean, it's got a hierarchy, right? A structural hierarchy in terms of because it's a focus database, but there's no hierarchy in the metadata. Saying country is then linked to car, is linked to model, is linked to body type, right? As it is in W3TL Lite where we saw a product category, product subcategory, and model. So if I were to select here Jaguar and Peugeot, but notice it limits now the country, the model, and the body type. Why? because I have link all filters. Notice the hierarchy option is not there because there is no hierarchies at all in the car database, or do not link filters, which is truly not linked. And in fact, if I were to actually, let's clear this off, and we're kind of out of time here, but it's, again, something you could try for yourself to see that you have an understanding of what I've described today and demonstrated. Now, if I were to say, let me just say, require selection on all of these fields, just as an example. And then run it. I have AutoPrompt. So guys, what would I expect to happen? If I select England and France, it still has all the values for car. A Jaguar, it still has all the values because they're not chained in the data source. And I can keep making selections, but I'm not going to do that. But you get the idea. Again, remember, that was because we said required, right? So let me close this out just because I made the change. Leave that. And I know we're at the very, very end. I'm going to right click, edit. And guys, now I know if I create a prompt, right, and I do auto prompt, it's not chained. But if I convert this to a page, now it's link all filters. Now if I run it, what do we know will happen? Because this is an authored page and because it says link all filters, now if I select from car, Jaguar and Peugeot, you'll see that they're all linked, right? Isn't that cool? And it's as simple as that. And then again, I can adjust these accordingly. However, and I'm going to take this last minute to do this. I'm going to leave here, go to Assemble Visualization. And I'm going to leave this last part for you to do as homework. You got this. Now, notice when I come in here, Assemble Visualization is from existing content. Notice it notices that all of these fields are not chained together. They're all at the same level. If I add them here and I run it, rather than just do it within preview, if I select Jaguar and Peugeot here, I'm still going to have all of the values because they're not chained together. However, and try this for yourself, guys, I can come here and take body type and move it onto model, and now I can see they're chained. And here I can move model to car, and now they're chained. And now I could do car to country, and now you can see they're all chained. How do you know? Because you can see they're indented, right? And oh wait, sorry. Thought I did the last one. I guess I didn't. Now they're chained, right? They're all in each other. Now when I run it, just pick Jaguar and Peugeot. You can see now, because country is above car in the chaining, it has all the values, but you can see model and body type is restricted. And certainly if I were to come here and then say, you know, just have Peugeot, you can see here it's restricted even further. So again, I know I presented a lot of information here. The point is I want to give you as much information as possible. You can go back and work with dynamic filters. But the key thing to understand is the difference when you have a standalone visualization, how that multi-directional works, whether it's just for preview, and if you have auto prompt, hierarchies are going to be respected. It's not going to utilize the designer features. Convert it to an authored page, and it will. And then with assembled visualizations, it's truly hierarchy or not, but you can control. So things that don't have a hierarchy, you can make them have a hierarchy. You can actually build that hierarchy there, or take something away that already exists in the data source. So I know I left Walter with very little time. I apologize. But anybody reach out to me with any questions. I'd be more than happy to clarify any points, because it's a lot of information to relay, but I'm trying to empower everybody.
There's one more question in the Q&A. Is it possible to add on assemble visualizations level new filters or parameters with interactive prompting that could be used in assigned reports? They're asking because they weren't able to get it to work, and the only method that worked was to add it first in assigned report and then populate it to page level.
Well, page level member has more control. So I'm not sure. You know what? If you have a case, you can create a case, reach out and ask to if I can be involved in that. I'll be more than happy to help out. Or you can reach out to me directly, email, either way.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Good questions. Good interaction here.
And what I would say is please give feedback and fill out your evaluations if this is the type of stuff that you want, and then we can break it out further to kind of expand it in the future if we need to go into more depth. So thank you. Sorry, Walter. Took even more of your time. Okay.
All right, so we're going to go into the mainframe part of our session. If you drop, please make sure you fill out the surveys. We do take those seriously and review them. If you're going to stick around for the mainframe side, sorry, we're running a little late, but it should only be about 10 minutes or so. I give myself a little fluff there. Again, if you're dropping, thanks for coming. We'll see you next month. And if you're a mainframe customer, stick around, and we're going to talk about some good information that you should provide if you're opening up a case because you have a problem. All right. So let me share my screen. Let's just jump right in. All right. So for this session, I've been working with cases, and there's a lot of going back and forth. You open a case. The tough ones are when a case gets open, it says, well, I ran this report this month and it's not working. And that's all the information we get. Not very helpful. So I figured I'm going to do this session to kind of give you an idea of when you open a case, things that you should provide in order to help make the resolution of your case go a little quicker. So back in the day, when we were the original IBI, we had our manuals, and in the beginning of the manuals, we had this section, what information you should have if you open a case. And this is what was there. Help our consultants answer your question, have this information. And there was a nice long list, and here it's fit on 2 pages. So I'm like, well, let's update that a little bit. So the first thing that you should do is try to simplify the procedure to just where the error is happening. Try not to send us a JES log that has 20 steps in your JCL, and only one of them is failing. Try to limit it, narrow it down so that you can only send us JCL that has 1 focus step, which is causing the error. I know it's easier to say than do, but if you can, we would really appreciate it. Also, if you have a procedure and you're creating, let's say, 50 hold files, and then the error happens just at the end of the procedure, if there's any way that you can just send us that procedure, maybe with some hold data, so that way we can replicate the error. So usually it's the first thing, can you replicate the error and shorten it down to its common lowest common form. Ideally, if you can recreate the error using one of our sample files, our mdata employee, this will allow us to quickly recreate it in-house and then hopefully say, okay, well, you're running this version, but when we run it in an higher version, it works. So we know somewhere along the way it already got fixed. All right. Instead of that long list of things that we said you should have, I'm narrowing it down to at least give us your stored procedure, the FOCUS that you're running, and not just from the JES log, the actual FOCUS code from your FOCUS library, from your FOCUS.data. Any master files or access FOCUS that's also associated. So if I'm doing table file card DB2, it's a DB2 table, then send us that master and the associated FOCUS. This run sheet, basically, in the beginning of your procedure, add these commands, !CPYD, !release. That way we can see what version you're running and the machine you're running on. And then we're going to ask you to send the complete JES log if you're running in batch. If you're not running in batch, we're going to say, can you run in batch? Now, do you have a batch job where you can run this procedure at? Because getting a JES log gives us a lot more information than trying to decipher it out of your TSO session. This is pretty much taken from the original document. What's the nature of the problem? What's the error? What are you seeing? What have you done differently now that you're getting this error? So, which goes into the next bullet. Has the procedure ever worked? Or is this some new code that you're running that's not working? The release of the operating system, that's always helpful. Has anything changed? Has your OS changed? Has your security system changed? Did you put a new version of DB2 in? Is it reproducible? Because if it's a one-off, then it's going to be harder for us to try to replicate it if you even can't reproduce it. We've already mentioned in its simplest form. We may ask you for a trace. That's one thing I did not add in here, how to get to traces, but I will add it to the presentation before you get it next week. And then what's the business impact of this problem? Okay, so I talked about send this to JES log. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So under TSO, and I'm doing this using SDSF. I know a lot of you don't, all of you don't use SDSF. Some of you use IOF. And unfortunately, we don't have that here, so I can't really show you how to do that. I believe you have to go on each component of the JES log and get each one individually and then store it to a data set, and then you can download it. But I'm going to show you SDSF. So if we go to SDSF, I'm going into the ST panel, which shows me my status of all jobs. I have 2 batch jobs that ran, plus my TSO session, which is running. And in front of the job, I'm going to put SE. So S is for select and E is for edit. So it's going to then show me the full JES log in an edit window. Now that I'm in an edit window, I can then put a C or type create on the command line, go down to the first line where it has 0001, and I can put C99999, like so. Hit enter, and then it gives me the create window. So here I'm going to put the name of the data set that I'm going to copy those 99,999 lines from where we entered the command into the new data set. We're going to create a new data set. So in this case, I'm putting send ibi.jeslog. Hit enter. And in my case, that data set didn't exist. So I'm going to use option 2 here that says I want to allocate a new data set and specify the attributes. And if you notice, on mine, it kind of defaulted to format FBA, record length 138. I believe that will always format when you come from an SE and do a create. But if not, just make sure that your record format is FBA and your LRECL is 138. When you hit enter at this point, you should get a message that the data set was created. So then you would have to download it to your PC and then upload it to the case. So you have a problem, you're running in batch, or if you're not, you try running in batch and you were able to get the same error in batch. Send us your FOCUS, your masters, your access files, FOCUSQL, and get your full JES log. All right, we may ask you after the fact to send us some dumps. Do not just send them to us. Send them to us when we ask for them. So we may ask you for a sysm dump. A sysm dump gives us a lot of information, but it's a subset of your environment. So in order to capture the sysm dump, all you need to do is add a DD card to your JCL that says sysm dump DD DSN equals. In this case, I'm doing a new data set. So this position is new catalog delete. and I'm giving it 1,000 cylinders with 500 secondary. The DCB in this case needs to be FBS, and the LRECL is 4160. If you're running in TSO and we ask you to send a system dump, you can do the allocation via a Dynamalloc. Once the data set is available and you're going to send it to us, you need to compress it. So the terminology is you're going to terse it. There's a job on that IBM provides called terse, and one of the parameters you're going to put is compress. Once it's compressed, then you're going to binary transfer the file to your PC to upload to the game. If that doesn't give us enough information, we may ask that you have your systems people configure a SVC dump or set a slip trap. So it gives a lot more information. It's readable. I gave some examples. So the first one looks for a SOC 4 in a job name called username, user job. Match limit should always be set to 1, which means that once you encounter this condition, only create one slip trap. If it happens a second time, don't create it on the second time. So it's like I want it to happen once and then stop. The second one is for a user Abend. So you have you and then the actual user number that you're looking for. The ID is arbitrary. It's what you want to call it. So FOC1, FOC2 doesn't have anything to do with the capturing or the actual job name. The third one is set slip action equals. The difference between this one is I added the S data. So the S data is going to get region information, common storage area, and the PSA. So we're identifying specific components that we want captured in the slip trap. And the reason we might ask you to do this is because your default settings might not give us the information that we're looking for. Again, once it's created, it should be tersed, compressed, and then transferred as binary. Only send when requested. You might have some products at your site which will interfere with getting a valid dump. So these are some that we've run into in the past: Abend Fault Analyzer, iSpy, Dumpmaster, CA Optimization 2. So you would need to disable them. So how you disable them is to put these DD cards in your JCL. So if you have Abend active, but you have this DD card ABNLIGNR, then it will disable it so we can get a valid dump. All right, once you have all the files together, so initially you're going to have the FocusX masters, access FocusQL, and the JESLog. Which I'll add JESLog to the first bullet. All of those are just text files. So all of those can be ASCII FTP'd. If we request any dumps, they should be tersed and then transferred as binary. And that is it. Any questions? All right, if there's no other questions, again, thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next month. And don't forget to fill out your surveys.